Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Handing the Shame Back, a show dedicated 100% to the men and women across the world who have experienced adult or sexual abuse as children. What we do as we proceed through this is we discuss all things related to child sexual abuse. So if for any reason you get triggered, please stop watching. Go to the show notes below and you will be directed to some help and resource. So in the meantime, I've got a fabulous guest today and he's with us all the way from the UK. His name is Jeremy Indika and he is the founder of the Something to Share movement. He began this in 2020. This provides a safe space for people to share their stories, and usually specific to adverse childhood experiences like child sexual abuse. He raises awareness for child sexual abuse online, and he does that through sharing his own story, which we're going to hear about today. And he also speaks to live audiences across the world. So very grateful to have Jeremy with us today. Welcome to you, Jeremy.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation to have the conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Great. So lower your expectations. You'll be fine. But anyway, no, I'm having you on. So Jeremy, what we do is we just really have a conversation. I find that if we just start at the beginning, that tends to gives us kind of a context for what emerges next. So only as much or as little as you're comfortable to share. Would be interested to know your story of child sexual abuse.
So this all happened when I was 8 years old, and it continued for 2 years, and nobody knew about it. Nobody caught us together. Nobody walked in on us. Nobody ever saw anything. Nobody ever suspected anything. So to the outside world, away from this secret, I was a young boy who was energetic, confident, a little bit cheeky, a little bit mischievous, doing well at school, playing all the sports, outspoken in class, like you would have never known that something like this was happening behind closed doors. And it was a man who was a work friend of my father. Now, my father was a doctor, and he would now and again be on call, meaning he would need to get called out to go and see patients. And my parents had separated, so I was spending some time at my mum's and some time at my dad's. And when I was spending time at my dad's, he was helping out a friend from work with accommodation. And this worked out very well, because if my dad got called out to go and see a patient, this man was in the house, so there was an adult looking after me, no problem. But this man took a liking to me, and he really went for it. And he managed to start sexually abusing me and make me feel very comfortable within that space. He had trained me or tricked me or groomed me into thinking that this was an okay thing to do. None of it was painful. None of it was violent. So there was nothing alarming in that area for me. And the abuse just continued unnoticed for 2 years until I was 10 years old. And again, when it finished, there were no signs. I didn't really feel like anything had stopped. I don't remember that being a significant moment in my head. And life continued from there.
So you've raised a lot of interesting points, Jeremy, and I just want to take you back to one. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. You talk about it not being violent or painful. In some ways, dare I say, that could be worse. And the reason I'm wanting to discuss this aspect with you is because you were so cleverly groomed, tricked, coerced, manipulated, that you perhaps didn't even see it coming. And more so that Dad was groomed as well. Because what
Right.
we know about this is it's the parents and the caregivers that are groomed uh, in order to have that proximity to you. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Mm.
And this is something I talk a lot about on my pages, because the general consensus in my experience of doing all of this work from the general public, people who have no direct link to this topic, they consider child sexual abuse to be a violent act of rape. And we know that it is technically rape, because the child has not given any consent to that action. But when we say rape, again, for the general public, that means some violent act of force. And I just want to explain to people that it's not always that. In fact, I'm going to guess, and this is a guess, that it's very rarely that, because the abuser doesn't want to hurt the child because the child may say something. So the grooming process can often be gentle and progress over time. And I believe that's what happened with me. And I don't actually remember the stages of the grooming process. I can only remember the acts, like the severity of the acts. I remember those visually in my head, but I don't remember when it all started. But that shows how powerful the process is. Crept up on me without me realizing, had me manipulated before I even realized.
So,
And
yeah.
the gentle actions of kissing, touching, fondling, cuddling, they're all actions that an 8-year-old, myself as an 8-year-old, felt warm, comforting. There was nothing, for the most part, there was nothing alarming in those actions. And just for anybody listening, I was 8 years old in 1993. Children weren't aware like they are today, because there were no conversations being had in homes. There was no conversations being had in schools. The films weren't like they were. YouTube wasn't around. Like, there was no exposure to sex or abuse in those days for somebody of my age. So really, I stood no chance.
Okay, so there's a few things you're saying. So one is respectfully disagree that it's not often violent or painful for a lot of our audience watching. And Jeremy, the reason I say that is because instinctively as children, you included, it wasn't right and it didn't feel right. Instinctively, we knew it was wrong. But equally, for some of our abusers and perpetrators out there, they took great delight in seeing the pain and fear on our faces. I'm talking on behalf of survivors like me who experienced the pain and the trauma and the violence. But also, it's interesting because, in my opinion, the perpetrator wouldn't necessarily be kind so you wouldn't tell. I think they just knew that and to this day, I'd like to know what you think of this, Jeremy. To this day, if you put an adult and a child in front of another adult and say, this happened, you as the child say, this happened, and the adult says, no, it didn't. To this day, most people will believe the adult.
Yes.
What do you think?
So yeah, it just becomes very difficult.
Mm.
And maybe that's actually there's a few times now that I've said about the violence, and maybe that's something that I shouldn't say moving forward, because actually I don't know for sure. You know, if most are violent, or most are painful, or most are not. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn there, so thank you for correcting me. So I feel, yeah, I feel like even if a child was to tell at the time that it was going on, it's very unlikely that they're going to be believed, especially if the adult that they're accusing is saying, no, that's not happening. Often because maybe the adult doesn't want to believe that that would happen, or is in disbelief that that could ever happen by the adult who's very unsuspecting. And so we do definitely have a situation here where I believe we are kind of in the Stone Ages with how we as a society are treating this or taking this seriously. I feel like we are so behind the times. Technology is accelerating, just as an example, but when it comes to the awareness and the education and the information that's out there around sexual abuse, I believe we are very much behind. So your comment of, if there was a child and an adult both telling you of a situation and the adult said no, they would be the one that would be believed. Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me.
Mm. And I look, and thank you for that. I just, unfortunately, it's like, you know, your dad was a doctor and he obviously had no idea. But of course, he's got his mate there who he has entrusted his gorgeous son to, his beautiful young son to. How on earth could he even get his mind around that his son wasn't safe when, as we discussed earlier, the grooming began with dad, actually. And the point is this, interesting comment you made, you know, that you weren't even aware of when it really began, the grooming itself, because he was so clever.
Yeah. And, you know, where does that technique from these people come from? Like, you know, have they read about it? Have they researched it? Or is it kind of the drive of that, whatever we're going to call it, that attraction or that sexual desire or that thrill that they're seeking, whatever it be? Is it the drive of that that is turning them, that makes them into that narcissistic, aggressive exploitation behavior? Like where does that even come from? Because he was so successful. He was so successful. We were doing things completely naked and I wasn't saying anything. So he was so successful at it. It's quite crazy.
Okay, let me ask you this though. If you think back instinctively on the inside, how were you feeling?
So that's an interesting question, because for me to answer that honestly, I would say 70% of the time, I was happy that we were doing these comforting things. It gave me a good feedback, right? So, for example, when he was performing oral sex on me, it made my genitals tingle.
Yeah,
I thought it was all right.
yeah.
I thought it was all right. There was no tools or knowledge that I had to distinguish that that was a wrong thing. However, when he started teaching me to do that to him, that's when I just remember thinking it was gross. You know, the taste was disgusting. That was a horrible thing. I couldn't really do it. But I think back now, why didn't you say anything then? And for me, it's like, well, still, I'm in this cocoon world. He's created this cocoon around me and him. And again, there's nothing in the education system teaching me about private areas. There's nothing in the education that teaching me what the definition of abuse is. There was no YouTube channel with people that I would possibly come across a video, right? The internet wasn't even around then. So I was completely in a room with my school, my home life, and my friends. So there was no chance of any information getting to me where it's like, that thing that I do with that man's wrong. You need to tell someone about it. So, like I said, I've already said it already, but like I really stood no chance.
No, you didn't. And the thing is, there's a couple of things actually as you're talking, Jeremy. You're doing great, by the way.
Thank you.
A couple of things that as you're talking, you know, our bodies are designed for pleasure. You know, of course, the body will respond. And unfortunately, what happens once we become adults is some of us, our beautiful audience watching, can feel guilt because they enjoy the experience. And look, I guess we're here to say, hey, you know what? The guilt, the shame never belonged to you. Your body just did what it was designed to do. But secondly, you know, I'm not surprised that what you're describing was confusing, because as I'm listening to you, Jeremy, the word confusing keeps coming up. You were put into such a confusing situation. Your dad really liked this man. Your dad trusted this man. By default, our parents at that age are God. Yes, whatever they say or do, we're going to say or do. So there's confusion number one. Confusion number two is you think, oh, that's gross. I don't like this. Why didn't I say anything? In no way could you have, because you were already complicit and he made sure that you were. And, you know, so you can see how that confusion would exist. And thirdly, put an adult and a child together, the power differential is huge. What do most parents say to their children? Do what you're told, be a good boy for so-and-so.
Yeah.
So confusion is huge, and I think our abusers and perpetrators know all of that. And you asked before, how did he learn to be so coercive and so clever and so gifted at this? And look, perhaps it's innate, but I guess I'm wondering if it just evolved, or is your feeling that he had already targeted you from the get-go? What do you think?
I'm really not sure. And one of the questions I would love to know is, where in his timeline am I? Am I the first? Right. So am I the first one? Am I one of, was there many before me? Have there been many after? Like, is this something that he had done a number of times? Is this something that had been done to him? So that's where he's learned it from. It's like, you know, he is the mystery. You know, he is the mystery in this story that we will never be able to find the answers to. You know, what was it that was thrilling him about me? You know, you think of an 8-year-old body, it's so underdeveloped, it's tiny, it's so childlike. My persona would have been so childlike at that age. Like, what was it that he found thrilling? I think that's a question that we should be, as a society, trying to find out why. Why is this happening? What is exciting these people about children? And we're not just talking about exciting them mentally. They've got a physical reaction, like their body's excited by children, right? You to get a erection on demand is almost impossible for most men, right? So it's not like he can just turn it on by demand of himself. It's like something would have had to have been turning him on so deeply for the erection to come, right? So what is going on in these people's brains is something that I want to try and investigate on in my work.
I think there could be some research that has been done. I'm not sure if it's a chromosome that is different or it's some sort of genetic coding, but I don't even want to guess. But I know I have heard the odd thing in the past. But yes, I understand that. I guess though, it's a really good point you raise in terms of a timeline, because we know, or we're informed, that for pedophiles, there's never just one. In our country, in New Zealand, we are told if they have one child, the chances are they've had up to 50, 50,
Yeah.
50 other children. So
Yeah.
can I ask you, what happened at the end of this? It ended when you were 10. Can you tell
Yeah.
us a bit about that?
He moved away. He moved away, and I continued my life into my teenage years. And I don't, as I mentioned at the start, I don't remember that being a significant moment. And I turned into a teenager, did well at school, left school, went to college, did well at college, and I started a career in engineering, mechanical engineering in an aerospace company on an apprenticeship, which went really, really well. And to my 20s, had great friends, out partying, everything was going well. I was a high achiever, I was ambitious, I was energetic, I loved social situations. Like, really, according to the stereotype, that wasn't present in my life. But it was when I was 25 that all changed. So up until 25, I'd never forgotten about what happened. Something would come up on the news that would remind me of it. Something will come up in conversation that would remind me of it. But I just didn't care. I just didn't care about it. Like, life was going so well. But at 25, that changed, because now the memories started to really hit me quite intensely and significantly.
So did they come back in the form of flashbacks, or you would just get triggered, or yeah,
It was low bouts of sadness to start with,
yeah,
that I wasn't sure where they were from. I
yeah.
sat with them for a little while, realized it was that. Then they developed into flashbacks, visual flashbacks. And then I realized I needed to do something different. And that's when I told somebody for the first time. I was 27 years old then.
At what stage or age through that recovery, like when I say recovery, meaning realization of what you had gone through and seeing it through an adult lens, if you like, Jeremy, at what stage did you realize actually this was really, really wrong?
I feel like there was always a feeling that it was really, really wrong there.
Okay.
And it it progressively became more apparent how wrong it was as I became an adult. As I became a teenager, started getting interested in girls, doing things with girls, and realizing that I'd already done all of those things with that man. But I like girls, so that's weird. Then obviously, as I get older into my late teenage years and early 20s, then I'm like, oh, this is, I was doing all those things, that's terrible. But it would just be a quick moment, and then it would just go to the back of my mind again. Really, it didn't even unsettle me for an hour. It was just like the flash moment. But then at 25, when that all changed, when I spoke to somebody for the first time and released it, which felt incredible, by the way, just felt so strong doing that. And then the severity of what happened really, really started to hit me. And I realized how terrible what happened was. And that's when I started to get really interested in what else was going out there, who else was going through something like this, how were people dealing with it, And I continued speaking to more mates about it, one person at a time as the years went on. I started getting more confident with telling the story, and the fear of talking about it started to dissolve. And I kept reading people's stories online on these websites and Facebook groups. And then I came to a situation where I thought, well, I could try and do something about this. And that's when this mission of sharing my story online started.
And I guess as I'm listening to you, were you ever able to tell your parents about what had happened? How did that go?
So I decided, as I was talking more and more about it, and as I made a decision that I would try and do something about this by sharing my story in public. Before I embarked on that journey, I, I through all the conversations I'd had with friends and friends' partners over the 5 years that I was speaking out, there were always two questions that kept coming up. And that was, where was the man that did this to me now? And is he still doing it to more children?
Yes.
That's when I decided to find out. And I found him online on Facebook. And I messaged him telling him that I want to meet him. And I'll do it in his place of choice, neutral location, park, coffee shop, whatever he wants. But there's no choice in this. I'm
Yeah.
coming to meet you. You're
Yeah.
coming to meet me.
Yeah.
And I said, if I don't hear back from you in 24 hours, I'm going to go to police. And I go away from my computer. I come back, he blocked me. So I called the police. I reported the crime. I gave my statement. The case was looking weak because there's no evidence, right? It's just my word against his. He was arrested. He was arrested. He obviously denied it. I mean, nobody's going to admit this, right? You're going to fight this till the end, because if you're ever found guilty, that's your life over. Society don't accept this crime, and the case was looking weak, and they needed more details. And who are the people that had those details? My parents. So to pursue the case, to make sure that he's not still doing it to more children, which was one of the aims of the prosecution, they had to be interviewed. Telling them was absolutely horrific. They both reacted the same. They're separated, so I told them on two different. I told them, it was two different occasions, two different separate situations. Telling my dad and telling my mum, and they both let out a scream that I'd never heard before, and it's ripped their lives apart. They'll never recover. They'll never ever recover from this. They probably, I mean, when did I tell them? 2019. So 4 years ago. They're probably still pinching themselves, wondering when they're going to wake up from this nightmare. That will never go. And so they know. Of course, everybody knows I'm speaking in public now about it. So everybody knows. It's completely given my life a different direction. I've left my engineering career, which was going really, really well. But I've left that behind because this is more important. And actually, there's no complaints from me as such, because this mission of trying to make sure that this doesn't happen to so many children is truly energizing and truly motivating.
Yeah.
And that's brought so much light to my life. But of course, there's the reverse of that. It's a double-edged sword, because it's a true burden as well, because I can't let it go.
No, and you never will.
And it causes a lot of problems for me in my head. I don't mean the abuse. I mean the absolute commitment that I cannot help but give to making a change.
Yeah. And look, I guess I'm interested to know just, and I'm speaking for our audience as well, when you're told your parents, yes, their lives will never be the same again, but what was their response? Did they doubt you? Did they 100% believe you? Did they support you? What was their response to you?
In all of my disclosures, which is one of the reasons why I say internally, you have to keep going. When things get tough, or I get setbacks, or I get kickbacks, or I get we're pursuing something with the movement and it gets shoved to the side, I think you have to keep going, because I feel like I have had a fortunate journey of disclosing. I have a great set of friends that I've known now for, some of them, 30 years. And when I told them, they just all gave me the perfect responses. They were honest, they were natural. Nobody ever questioned me. Everybody gave me space to talk. Everybody listened.
And that was mum and
Everybody
dad as
told
well.
me,
Mum and dad support.
and mum and dad. And
Fantastic.
mum and dad.
So what did the police do? Were they able to take it further, or it just didn't go anywhere?
Case got closed after 9 months.
Yeah.
Doesn't go anywhere. And I just want to shout out the police, right? Because they don't get enough credit, right? For people who have had a bad experience with the police, I'm obviously sorry about that. But there's corruption and bad people in every industry, right? The police are not squeaky clean, right? Whatever job you go to, there's somebody cheating the system. There's somebody not doing their job very well, right? So you're going to get that in the police as well. But my experience in the police, and I want to get more people on my YouTube channel that have had a similar experience, was they couldn't do enough to help me. But the restriction that they have is the government keep cutting their fundings. So they've got more cases than they can deal with. And so I start to become frustrated when I only see hammering of the police, because that's not going to encourage them to do their job better, right? If you keep telling a child that they're naughty and they're useless, they're going to be naughty and useless. All right. So my response is, you try being on the child abuse investigation team in the police. You try coming to work every Monday and dealing with people's stories. Like, you're absorbing that trauma. You think about being on the child abuse investigation police teams who are trying to prosecute the criminals who post child sexual abuse material. They have to watch that. To prosecute, they have to watch those videos. Like, can we just give them can we just like give them some credit, And my experience was they couldn't do enough to help me, but their hands are tied. They just don't have enough time. And also, they only have, I managed to get a meeting with the police officers that dealt with my case, because I wanted to know what makes a strong case. What makes a case one that you can pursue. And they said, in most historic cases, you need more than one person accusing that person. That's what you need. But they also said, even if you do have two people accusing, for example, they only have enough money to take the top 20% to court. They have to rank them in order of strength, in order of possibility of prosecution, and they can only take the top 20%. The rest have to go, because the government don't take this seriously.
No, well, and as we know, it's across all levels of society. It's not gender discriminate, socioeconomic discriminate, race discriminate. It's any and everywhere. I guess the point is this: unfortunately, when it's he said, and you were a child at the time, the odds are stacked against you. But it's unfortunate, because, as you and I both know, there will be other victims out there, other boys who are now men who perhaps are struggling. So you never know, Jeremy. Some of what you say, I don't know how much identification about him you provide when you're talking or online, but someone may recognize something you say about this person. But yes, very, very cleverly done and very stacked. The odds are stacked. And it all, I think, too, because it all begins in secrecy, then of course silence is ensured, and then shame will keep us quiet. Even at 25, for you to find your voice, I imagine, would have felt really challenging. Yeah.
And what's interesting is I don't ever name him. I don't ever post a picture of him. One of the reasons for that is because I can't.
No.
Because I actually went and knocked on his door to confront him after I tried prosecuting him, and he prosecuted me for doing that. He took me to court. I was charged, and I have a restriction order, meaning I can never contact him again. So for me to post any of his details would not be sensible for me. And when I left court, the judge said, "You need to be on best behavior. Do not break the rules." So I cannot post details of him ever. So I can't find the other people that he has done this to. So
do you
I'm
think,
kind of in no man's land with it.
yeah, you are. Do you think the judge was aware that this person had abused you? Was that able to be mentioned?
Yeah, it's interesting. So at the start of the trial, and I was being charged with stalking, harassment, and assault. And at the start of the trial, I felt like everybody in the courtroom thought I was a criminal, a madman, just going around knocking on people's doors. And as the trial evolved and continued and everybody was questioned, it was like at the end of the trial, everybody could see that I went to the door. What I'm saying I went to the door for is absolutely true. And I felt like the judges could see that as well. And but we were there to investigate me going to somebody's house and knocking on somebody's door for an allegation that's already been investigated.
Yeah.
And you can't go around doing that. So I hold my hands up, like, fair enough. I'll take my criminal record. But I got a chance to say everything to him. And if I did anything, at the very least, I sent a shiver up his spine that if he's still doing it to more children, that like nobody's standing for this anymore. Like, enough is enough. Like, we're not scared about this anymore. So
did you this is just a very shallow question, so bear with. did you feel really empowered being able to eyeball this bastard? Did it feel like,
I mean,
yeah,
it just felt like one of the most incredible moments of my life.
yeah,
It really did. Because he was scared. He was terrified. He was shouting over me, trying to drown out my voice, because the boy that he abused has just turned up at his door.
yeah,
And he tried to get the door shut, but I managed to hold it open. That was the assault charge, because I actually, when he went to slam it closed initially, I pushed it open, but pushed it into him and left the red mark on his chest. That was the assault charge. And I stood calmly, and I didn't lose my cool at all. I stood calmly. I said everything that I wanted to say. I was talking for like 5 minutes until the police arrived. So I got my bit. And actually, that's a really empowering part of the story. I mean, that is proving to be one of the gripping parts of the story as I talk to live audiences and explain what happened. It really, everybody's eyes light up when I get to that part of the story. Like, people just can't believe it, which is understandable. And I tell them what happened, and I can feel everybody in the audience being empowered. Now, last week I spoke at a school, and I spoke to year 9s, 10s, and 11s. So in this country, that's children from the age of 13 to 16. And I got booked by this school, which I'm very, very pleased about. And I went in and I told my story. And I asked my audience online before I went, do you think I should take certain parts of my story out when I speak to these under 18 children, technically? Should I take out the part of me knocking on his door? Should I take out the part of my parents' pain? Because, of course, I'm not going there to endorse anybody knocking on anybody's door, right? And I also don't want to go there and put anyone off telling their parents about anything. The response to that post, as I asked for advice from my followers, there were 200 odd comments, and near enough, everybody said, you've got to keep it in because it's real and it will be memorable for those young people. They'll never forget that story. And they won't, they're online every day. Like, they see everything, and it really is a empowering part of the story. And when I spoke last week to those 13 to 16-year-olds, I mean, they were fascinated by that part. And my summary, or the reason why I feel that part is so important, is because I just want to let people know there's nothing to be afraid of, right? When you're an adult, and I'm talking from my experience, right? When you're an adult, I feel like the fear when you see your abuser is your mind playing a trick on you, thinking you're back there. So when I see him and I feel fear, it's my mind playing a trick that I'm 8 years old again and he's a threat to me. I'm 37 years old. He's no threat to me now. And I just want to let people know that, really, if you want to take this from my story, there's nothing to be afraid of. These people are weak, fragile, lacking in so many areas, and we are not those people. So the tables have turned.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting what you're describing. I think for some people, it's an interesting point you raise. When people see their abuser again, whether it's by chance or a decision, they typically are pulled straight back into the age the abuse began. Even to the point where, as an older teenager, one woman described getting into the car with the main abuser and at the trial being asked, but you were 19, why would you do that? And she said, because in that moment I was 11. And so I think it's very powerful what our minds do. I also have a slightly different view, Jeremy, in that for some of our audience who may have had very powerful, ongoing, frightening experiences, the fear is still there, and the shame means that they're unable to speak. So it's wonderful that you can face and deal into, but equally, audience, what you'll find is when it's your time, you will know it. How will you know it? Because you'll do it. So I think we have to trust our inside. Yeah, our instinct.
I completely agree. And people have often asked me, do you wish you said something earlier? So first friend I told was 27 years old, right? So some people ask me, do you wish you'd said something earlier? And my response to that is along the lines of what you just said here. I spoke when it was my time to speak, when it was my time to speak.
Yes.
I think if somebody had come into my environment when I was 21 and had said something to me about it, and people should speak out if this has happened to them, something like that, I think that would have been too early for me. So yeah, I completely agree with. I'm completely aligned with what you're saying.
I think
that's one of the reasons.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes, sorry. For survivors, a lot of us experience dissociation, and by that I mean we can't stay in our body when the abuse occurred and fast track to adulthood when we're ready to deal with the trauma. And for you, it was 25 years old when your mind said, hey, Jeremy, it's time. For me, I was 32. doesn't matter what age we're at. The point is dissociation plays a part. And just for those that aren't sure what that is, it means that when the abuse is happening, it's too hard, so your mind won't stay with what's happening because you have to face that person the next day or the next hour or whatever. So it protects you, yeah. And then I think there's a little thought out there, or there's a couple actually. One is you need to deal with it. You need to face them. You need to take charge of it. And yet we still can feel quite regressed and in that age that we were when it was all happening. So it can be quite challenging. The other thing I think too is that for some of us whose parents or family decided, I don't believe you, you've always been the troublemaker, this is not actually the case, he's a great guy, how could you say that? You've then got that double whammy, Jeremy, where if you try and speak your truth, you're shut down. Now, as a survivor, you know the first person you chose, you would have felt safe, comfortable, and completely trusted. Think about those other survivors among us, part of our beautiful audience, who have tried and then got darvoed, so denied, attacked, reverse the order of victim and offender, and it's highly unlikely they'll ever try again. What do you make of that?
My heart goes out to anyone who has experienced horrific response to their disclosure.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't even imagine how that feels. I've had a couple of comments on a few of my videos over the 4 years I've been doing this now, and questioning my story or picking holes in my story or accusing me of lying or for attention or yeah, I've had, you know, you get 1 in 100 comments that start to become negative, or, you know, it's just people behind their computer screens, and that is horrific to take on. Like, it really is. So to have that actually in response, and that's somebody who I don't know, who's just, you know, on my page, but to actually have a family member or a friend or somebody who you're trusting with the information to come back to you and give you a response like that. Well, for anybody that's listening that's had that happen to them, I am so sorry that happened to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So there's a lot of work to do ahead, but back to you.com. Jeremy, tell us all about Something to Say. What gave you the idea?
Okay.
How did you begin?
Yeah.
What are you doing with it?
So 2 years ago, or just short of 2 years ago, because I got so much confidence and strength and courage from every time I told my story to the next person, and the fear and the shame and the guilt of it was dissolving with every time I told, I wanted to create a space where other people can have the opportunity to share their story if they wish to do so. So I launched this movement called Something to Say, and we are now taking stories. I think we shared nearly coming up to 100 now, and people are really talking from a place of strength and courage about their experiences as children. Mostly that's what it is at the moment on that platform. We've just recently, over the last few months, added a bit of variety to the page as well, because we could see the potential in it. And we've opened it up for people's artwork, people's poems, people's writing. A few people are doing a bit of research for us, getting some statistics together. So it's actually now, with the small team of people that are working that movement, all volunteers, it's now turning into a place not only of people can express themselves and share their stories, but it's becoming a place of information and resource. For example, a woman called Ashley from Australia. She's a psychologist. She's following. She wrote in with 3 advice points or 3 tips for if somebody discloses to you. So it's becoming a really nice platform of variety now.
That's awesome, and a place where people have community and feel safe to share, and you can see the beautiful warmth and empathy there is there.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah, it's a brilliant situation we've got going on there. We've got massive plans for it, so I'm really happy.
Yay. And tell us,
Yeah.
I guess I'd love to know what advice you would give to other survivors who are perhaps finding the courage to speak their truth for the first time, or deal with
Okay.
what they're dealing with.
Mm. So I just would like to mention some of the options that I've come across now in the time that I've been doing this for anybody that is feeling like releasing the story is the thing that they want to do. So first of all, you could do it in person with somebody who you trust, a family member, a friend, even a work colleague, somebody who you trust with that information. Second, if you don't want to do that, that's completely understandable. There are incredible websites, chat rooms, pages, accounts online that help you share your story. Of course, the one that I'm running is one of them. There's another one on Facebook called Tell Somebody, as an example. And you can write to them and you could share your story in words and submit your picture. So that's the second option. Now, if you don't want to do that because that's too public for you, absolutely, that is still no problem. You could also ring one of the helplines of a local charity and just speak to somebody on the phone. Now, they're professional people and they're trained to receive disclosures. So that's another option. Now, fourth and final one, and I'm fond of this one because I do it continually. I'm still doing this one, and that's journaling.
Yes.
So what you can do, if you wish to do so, this is very private and this is very controllable as well. You can write your story down. Now, for anybody that is listening that's like, that is a great idea, just a couple more points on that. If it feels scary still, which understandably it probably will feel scary still, just challenge yourself for, let's say, on a Tuesday to write 2 sentences about your story, but write them in a way that when you read them back to yourself, they make you feel strong. Then set yourself a target. The following week, on a Tuesday, you write 2 more sentences about your story and you rewrite the first 2 to ensure that they make you feel strong when you read them back. Now you've got 4 sentences. Now every week you build another 2 sentences and another 2 sentences, and then you start to form your story. And you're doing it in a way that when you read it back to yourself, you feel strong. And I feel like that really helped me reprogram the lens that I look through at my story, and found it absolutely valuable. So for anybody that is thinking about releasing their story, there are a number of ways that you can do that, and you can pick what suits you at the time.
That's a brilliant idea. Thank you so much. And I guess, Jeremy, just as we're heading into close, do you have anything you would like to say? I'm not quoting something to say. Is there anything you would like to share that we haven't touched on as yet? Anything kind of top of mind for you that you would like the beautiful audience to know?
Yes, I feel like we have so much work to do with working towards preventing this happening to so many children. And I understand that that's all about supporting people. Of course, one massive point is to support the people that have been through it. And working towards prevention, I know there is more and more incredible initiatives to educate children on simple things like private areas and who they can speak to, etc. I also am looking to open the conversation on what we're going to do with the people that are committing this crime. because that has to be a massive piece of the puzzle as well, because we can educate the children to the high hills. If we're not going to stop the people from actually committing the crime, then, you know, they're always going to find a child that isn't going to say something. I interviewed the director of a charity here in the UK a couple of months ago. The charity is called Stop It Now. And that is a charity that work with offenders or work with people who feel like they're going to offend. In 2021, they received 7,000 calls from men who were worried about what they were watching online and worried about the thoughts that they've got in their head. That's an incredible number just for one charity here in England. I feel like we don't see that often enough. And I want to try to open the conversation on my pages about what we're going to do before they commit the crime. How are we going to create a society where there's somewhere for them to go if they feel like they're in temptation of committing the crime? Because once the crime's been committed, it's too late. We're late to the party there, right? We're late to the situation there, because I feel like we're all so happy to jump on the situation when the person's been found out and is being prosecuted, and we celebrate when they're put in prison. When for me, I understand it's a good thing that they're put in prison. Of course, I'm not denying that, but we were late to that situation. Where were we before, in all the steps before the crime has been committed? So I just want to leave that with people. I know that's very, very uncomfortable for us to think about. How are we going to work with these people that are committing the crime? Because we just want to push them in the corner of the room and turn the light out on them. But I feel like if we're going to get serious about this, we need to attack it from all angles.
And the other point to raise as well, and I wasn't sure if you were aware, but recent stats from the UK indicate that 25 to 30% of pedophiles are women. So we have to stop.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we have to stop the narrative.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That it's just males abuse. It's not. Up to a third are female. So
okay, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's growing as well, Jeremy.
Okay.
That's growing.
Right. Yeah, fantastic. Oh, I'll change my wording for that for sure. Because the last statistic that I saw was 3% was women.
No, 25 to 30%.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. So it's worth looking at. And of course, people aren't coming forward and easily saying this stuff, but it's getting bigger. Hey, look, I just want to thank you so much, Jeremy. It's been such a pleasure to have you on, and
thank you.
Your courage and your role modeling will definitely have helped our audience, and some people will feel less alone because of that. So please stay right there, and I'll close out. Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. So guys, aren't we lucky to have had Jeremy today? And he said many things, but what I really liked in particular was his query earlier, which was, I wonder where in the timeline I was. And I think for us as adult survivors, observing that, it's a useful question, because if our fear of speaking out is about ourselves, we understand that, but actually we could be helping save some other beautiful children out there by finding out more about this, your own personal abuser, I mean. The second thing he said that has stuck with me was, every time Jeremy spoke out, the fear, the shame, and the guilt was dissolving more and more. So I think that's a really powerful gift for all of us as survivors. In the meantime, until we see each other again, please look after your beautiful selves. I see you, I believe you, and I stand beside you. Please do like, subscribe, and share this video.